Hi, I'm Kate Bailey. I'm a coach, an author, and a sober mama. And this is Love Sober, the podcast for the sober and sober curious.
You know who made it.
Hi, and welcome back to Love Sober, the podcast for the sober and sober curious. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Sarah Levine. And Sarah's a coach. She's a holistic mindset coach and works with women in recovery. And she's also a writer and the lover of creativity. Hi, welcome, Sarah. So lovely to meet you.
It's really nice to meet you too.
So we will start with a bit of a check-in, just saying, just kind of land, really have a bit of a chat. How are you today? And where are you today?
Where am I? I'm in my office in Toronto, Canada. Geographically speaking, I am landing here in this space with you. I'm getting over a cold, and it's kind of the residual leftover elements of this kind of ongoing sickness that I've had for about a month. And it's funny because I was thinking about it this morning and about how I overdid. I have a habit of overdoing. Can you relate? And I have I overdid it in November, and then all of December I was under the weather. And I was thinking in my meditation this morning about how incredible the mind-body connection is, and how it didn't let me get sick when I had everything booked on my schedule. And then the moment that I had time during the holidays, it was like it made up for lost time. And now I'm still getting over that. So excuse my kind of nasal, hoarse voice. But other than that, I am great, and I'm happy to be here.
Oh, welcome. Yeah, and yeah, it is the season, right? Of the bugs and the colds and the low. And I really feel that like there's a real, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but in the UK, I think people listening in can relate to just heavy things feel heavy and low and dark and wintering. And it's like, don't make me speak to anyone or go out or do anything.
I mean, the interesting piece of it is that it's forced me to rest, which is not, as someone who overdoes, it's like it's actually been an interesting month of being like my own body forcing me to rest. And so I'm trying to incorporate that in this year for sure, is more rest, more downtime, more balance.
Yeah, me too. I was thinking about my word of the year, and I had various things, and I went to this it was a lovely, just before New Year, I'm a member of a beautiful yoga studio in a yoga community, and my friend who owns the yoga studio, she said, look, come to this, because often I hold space as a coach and always doing this and this, and don't generally get that myself
for yourself.
And, and she said, come along. And one of her yoga teachers was doing this lovely intention and reflection. So closing down the old year, opening the new year, but in this really embodied kind of, we did a lot of visualization and lying down and then journaling together. And
Beautiful.
I got a completely different answer. And I realized how much last year felt like the fire. And I was knackered and I just wanted water and to let the life and the river do more and for me to do less. It was like,
be in flow, ride the wave that's already there and do less. It's beautiful.
I'm hearing you. So we're starting from a very similar position today.
Yes, we're both very relaxed.
So we start off, obviously, that bit of a check-in, but if you could just sort of tell the listeners a bit about what brought you to the decision to be alcohol-free in your journey.
Alcohol-free. I always feel like I came in the side door to recovery from alcohol. I have a relationship with another recovery fellowship where I had some time in, and as a sort of support to that program and that fellowship with that substance, I would go to open AA meetings in my area to kind of just get like a deeper impact into the recovery that I had for this other substance. So, you know, that had been ongoing. That was part of like my toolkit for that issue. And so I feel like in some sense I was downloading recovery from alcohol throughout that experience into my subconscious mind, so that when I, you know, years later got to the point where I kind of hit a bottom with alcohol, I knew exactly where to go. I knew I had heard all the stories. I had seen people recover. I had seen like miracles happen. I'd heard all of it, and so I knew exactly where to go. And I would say like I didn't immediately identify that alcohol was the problem. Funnily enough, I I think like I always think of my bottom with alcohol as the point at which I wanted so dearly to stop wanting to die, and hitting the bottom of not wanting to go on, and having all of those sort of meetings in my arsenal sort of simmering in my mind for all those years. I think I just followed my feet to a meeting and actually sat in a room as someone who was looking for sobriety rather than supporting another addiction, recovery from another addiction. So I do always feel like I kind of came in the side door that way, but um, it was a mental unraveling. I was high functioning. Um, and just, I think I was not high functioning emotionally and spiritually and mentally. On the outside, things
Yeah.
looked great, right? So
Yeah, so there's a
yeah.
few things there that in
Hmm.
terms of so alcohol being your not your primary drug of choice,
Hmm.
so that being the secondary, but also this kind of yeah, there's sort of a mental health piece
Yeah.
there that was
Yeah.
really sounds like that was really linked with the alcohol.
I mean, yeah, and I just couldn't connect that what happens in the what happens like to the chemistry of my body in hangover states, like in what happens to me in that is what's causing the desire to not want to go on. That is what's causing those low bottom mental blank spots, like those places where I felt like I needed to get out. And I didn't link it to alcohol
Mm,
because I didn't drink every day, because I didn't, you know, I was high functioning, because I had a job, because most of my relationships were intact. I just didn't identify, even though I had heard so many stories. So thank goodness I went regardless of that. You know, one of the greatest things I heard early on in my recovery was listen for the similarities and not the differences. And so the beautiful thing about that was the following my feet to the meetings. I couldn't relate. I just knew I was in the right place, you know? So that was kind of like how I got there for sure, in a roundabout way. Yeah, I've had an eating disorder for most of my life. Before I found alcohol, I found food. And even primary and secondary, I really see it's like I just self-medicate. And
mm,
I'll use sort of what's readily available. And as a 12-year-old, food was so much more available to me than alcohol and drugs. So
mm,
um, it was all kind of, for me, it's kind of relating back to that same foundational trauma and wound. And so
yeah,
alcohol, any, you know, 3 garbage cans and 2 lids, something's always going to kind of be up for me or be exciting to me or
yeah,
be
yeah.
able to numb out or escape from. So yeah, that first little while, uh it's interesting. I had a very different experience than I did in the other fellowship, because I immersed myself immediately into that recovery program. Um, I did all the quote do things, you know, I got a
Mm,
sponsor. I went to meetings every day. I literally made recovery a full-time job, other than, you know, my full-time job, like every evening, every weekend. And
mm,
um, I moved away from the things that were that made drinking look desirable again. I stopped going to bars. So I started like creating relationships in sobriety that kept me more linked in, so that I wasn't on the periphery, right? I was kind of really in the center of it. And that created a lot more ease in building this life in recovery, because so much of my life before was linked to alcohol. How I made friends, how I met men, how I was social, how I relaxed, everything, how I rewarded myself, how I celebrated myself, how I commiserated with myself. Like everything was around alcohol. So how do you build a life from that place? Unless, I know from mindset work, like if I am trying to shed a habit or something that's not working for me, and I don't replace it with something positive, it'll just automatically replace with another negative thing. I've seen it happen over and over again in myself and others. So it is kind of this replacing one world that's fueled by alcohol in some sense, or connected to, and replacing it with this one that was my introduction to recovery, which was through AA.
Yeah. Thank you. I resonate with a lot of that. I'm thinking so the more I go down, and the longer I go in sobriety or recovery. Like I didn't even used to like the word recovery when I first got sober. I was like, oh no, that's not for me. I just I hate that word. Like I just
why did you hate it?
Because it sounded to me it sounded negative, and I needed there was so much negativity out there, and in the UK there was not a positive, in any way, a positive sobriety or recovery movement. We go back 10 years. It was like so taboo, and so I was like, no, I need this to look pretty, and I need it to be really positive, because otherwise I'm not going to want to do it. Because I felt I had a lot of shame to heal. I had a lot of complex trauma, and which I didn't know I had, because I didn't know about things like that then. So I hear that, and I remember Dawn Nickel, who the founder of She Recovers, said, we're all recovering from something. And she said to me, it's always trauma. There's always a trauma.
Always.
It's so true, right? So now it's like you said, there's that. So I would say, I mean, alcohol was the substance, but my before might have looked like, I don't know, perfectionism. The obsessional behavior around certain things, but there was that, what I found in sobriety and recovery was that sort of almost like a pathway, a structure, tools for living, to then just live and replace it.
I mean, and also not to just keep running an inch or two ahead of the trauma. Like we're not just like putting a Band-Aid on some gaping wound here. We're like healing. In recovery for me is really about healing that wound, and not about, what alcohol, drugs, shopping, men, like all of it, food, it all sort of just put a Band-Aid on it, gave me a short-term relief, but you can't put a Band-Aid on a gunshot, right? So like gun wound, or, so I think that that's really been the focus of recovery for me too, is like going into that, healing that wound and that trauma, for sure. And also acknowledging that I'm so grateful that I had those things when I did, because that kid, I mean, the beauty of Anne's writing class, of writing your recovery, is I've had this incredible experience of going back into my past, like writing my recovery. I started where the trauma was. I started in childhood, started writing about this stuff that I hadn't really poked around with for a long time. And it really helped me to see that I needed those quote self-medications to survive. But no one ever kind of took me aside years later and said, it's safe now. You can feel these things now. You can do this now. And so that's why at 27, I had this, I was still medicating the same way as I did when I was kind of amidst that trauma as a child.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. And you've touched on then, where we're going to sort of go next, really, in terms of talking about I guess this is, isn't it? And it is the name of Anne's course,
Mm-hmm.
and Dowsett Johnston. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the amazing course that she runs called Writing Your Recovery. And I guess that's what we're talking here, right? Isn't it? It's
Mm-hmm.
how do you maintain your, and work through your recovery in terms of creative processes and writing?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't always write. I was, uh, when people would suggest journaling, I would, get nauseous. Like I was so adverse. It never appealed to me to put pen to paper. Um, I did all the other do things, right? I did all the other suggestions, but I was so resistant to writing in any way, even journaling. And so, um, what's been really interesting is Anne and I and the course intersected at just the right time where I was open, um, and had the desire to actually start to write and to see what would happen. I was purely curious. I wanted to see what this was about, and I wanted to see if I could write it. It was curiosity, and the container that Anne has created for women like me, and women in recovery and recovering from anything. I've met amazing women from all walks of life and recovering from all kinds of things. It kind of uh, ignited something in me that I didn't even really know was there. I um, I can say, that through the course of her writing, or in her course, I have definitely healed some old stuff, like some self-image stuff. Like I started drinking and doing drugs and stuff very early on, and I left high school in grade 10, and it was always a really huge source of shame for me was that I didn't graduate high school. And so the idea of me joining a writing class was so pushing me out of my comfort zone, and it felt so risky, you know. It felt like I'd be found out. There was, who am
Mhm.
I to want to write a memoir? Who's going to want to read that? Who's, and all the delicious questions come up, and I worked through them, and I did it anyway, and Anne really helped me with that. But having done multiple rounds of the course, like I can sit here and tell you I'm a writer, and I'm really good at it, and I love it. And I have found um this passion, like, that I didn't even really know I had for most of my life. And this other way of communicating, because I love communicating, but I didn't, there's this whole other like medium that I hadn't even encountered yet. So that on its own is a huge gift. The other thing about like the writing and the creativity is uh being able to look at my past and my journey from my eyes today, from the perspective of the woman I am now at 42. I got sober at 27, and I'm writing about stuff that happened when I was 12. So
Yeah.
that has been incredibly healing, to be able to take things that happened to me now or then as a child and look at them through the eyes of, now I'm a mother of two.
Mm.
I have the compassion for the child I was going through these things, picking up alcohol, doing the stuff we do when we're drinking, that I never could have had. And I have an insight into what she was going through, that girl, that I never had before. It's really helped me to heal a lot of my past. And it's actually illuminated some things that I had stories about, but actually when I investigated the truths around these things, I get to change my mind about what I'm believing to be true about them, which is huge.
Yeah, there's such a lot of agency in that,
Yeah.
isn't there?
Yeah.
And I love,
Yeah.
do you know what you're reminding me of? Because I did Anne's course last summer,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like there was some kind of catalyst that happened with me last year. There's this is not my podcast, so I won't go on about it.
I want to hear.
But basically, I've been writing non-fiction, so quit lit, if you like, sort of two books. I've got 2 books out. But I'd never done the kind of memoir stuff. And so I started working with Anne. And what came out of writing these sort of patchworks and vignettes almost.
Quilt squares.
The quilt squares. Was it just went back to childhood, like you're saying, it just went back to childhood. And I remember Anne saying to me, there's something, because there's stuff going on with my teenage son at the moment, and I was often just turning up to a caller and sometimes in floods of tears, as you do. It's like, yay. That's great. Welcome, Kate. That was Kate's in tears again. But that was fine. And what was amazing was it was a writing course where you could do that it properly, because she's a therapist. She can hold that space therapeutically and safely for people, right? So she said, I'm sure there's something around teenage, there's something around the teenage years here, because I was faffing about with different ideas. Anyway, long story short, I end up after a car crash in the summer thinking I can't, there's some now all the trauma that's been building up through all the things I now can't process that shit quick enough, because now I have a shock trauma on top. Really, don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny. Stop laughing, Kate. And so I end up go to therapy, and so I end up doing internal family systems, which is all that stuff around, the adult, and what I found is the teenage bit is like, fuck you. Like my little ones, my the younger ones are all fine. We can chat about them, we can go there. And I'm like, nah, my inner teen is not interested in particularly talking to anyone. She's your firefighter. She's really is. And I'm I'm fine with that. And you know what, I'm down with that right now. So I really love what you're saying, and I have been working similarly in that way of as our adult selves in recovery, reclaiming that agency as adults to look at these parts, right? And how beautiful to do it creatively with Anne, because I also feel that when you do something like that, where you do it through a modality or in a medium like writing, it's almost like there's a little bit of a safety wall. It's almost like one step removed, so you can apply it creatively, right? Absolutely. It's through a filter in a sense, and you get to choose sort of how vulnerable you want to be. And in that sense, it kind of puts control in the hands of, when there's trauma, likely someone who hasn't had control in times when they craved it or needed it the most. It's interesting. So it's built-in consent there. Exactly. Well, just feeling like you said, agency, like having that control. So much of my own coaching and what I do and what I've experienced through the writing with Anne is the same, is through IFS, through internal family systems. And what Anne's the Writing Your Recovery course started to give me, and I could see, was this relationship with all of my parts. All of, like you said, you talked about the teenager, my strongest inner, that voice, that the biggest firefighter, the biggest she's about 13, and it will be on her tombstone. I don't wanna. I don't wanna. I just don't wanna. Spelt wanna. WANNA. I don't wanna. Love it. And it's honestly that work, the IFS work, the Writing Your Recovery work, those two things kind of intersected at the same time, and it's allowed me to develop a relationship with myself in a new way. And none of that would be available to me if I was drinking or medicating. All of this happened when I cleared the channel between all those parts and the core self, which is undamageable.
which is perfect and intact and wise. And so the more I write about me and all the parts of me that create a 42-year-old, the more okay and accepting and loving and compassionate I am towards them. Oh my gosh. But also the more I see their like the innate wisdom, and like I kind of look at some of the stuff I did and those that teenager did at the time, and I'm like, you go, like, good for you. You know, you had to do those things. And like I said, like no one sort of took me aside when I was older and said, these parts can calm down. These parts are okay. And in writing and connecting with those parts, I do that now all the time. I talk to them. I tell them it's okay. We're not at that place that I was writing about last week in the workshop, you know? So that is such a healing process, all those things together. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally hear you, you know, and I really resonate. I really resonate with you. It's interesting, isn't it, that we seem to have had a little bit of a similar kind of experience
yes
with that. And I do, you know, I mean, there's something about that, the creative process, the ability to play with narratives and voices that works very well with that therapeutic approach.
Oh, I mean,
they're like
hand in hand.
Yeah, they're like best friends, right?
Totally.
So, yeah.
You know, Anne talks a lot about quilt squares, which I love because the idea of writing anything was daunting when I started. And I mean, I went in cold into my first group, and like there are some really phenomenal writers. I was hearing them just read their work and going like, oh, I'm in the wrong place. Like I felt so out of my depth. And I love that Anne is so great with writers of like of all stages of work, you know, of all ability and all experience levels. And she talked to me so much about quilt squares. And so I love the idea of that, writing a small chunk. Basically, I took a memory and I wrote it, and that was a quilt square. And like you just said, that quilt square is usually written in the voice of the age that the memory occurred. So like you're really
for sure.
It's time travel.
Machine. Yeah, it's a time travel. It is.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah. And I agree. I found it's lovely. It's like being like in this little club with her. I just really liked her, the fact, you know, she knew when to push me as well, when to go, okay, so what's the point of this? Like, let's when, you know, just called me a little bit, and it was like, okay, now I need to just stop faffing and kind of and get some structure, or I need to do this and I need to do that, and just in the most nurturing way. And so lovely to be with other women, you know, sharing their writing. I just wanted to ask you as well about other bits and bobs in your toolkit, in your recovery toolkit.
Well, there's a few. One is community. Like, it's a huge part of my life. I'm a bit of a lone wolf. I'm an introvert that can present as an extrovert. So I like to, I definitely need alone time, and I'm really good with smaller groups. My coaching is like a smaller, more intimate group of women. And I think that I learned, like, this is something that I kind of adopted from early on in recovery rooms, right? Going to recovery meetings. And what I got, like, truly understood was that I wasn't alone. Was that even like the things that I think, especially early on, that were so grotesque, or that were like, quote, take to your grave things that had happened or I had done in my life. Like one of the most powerful experiences is going into a community of people and snitching on yourself or sharing something that is such a source of shame, and having the room look like a bunch of bobbleheads nodding along because they've done it too. And that is why, like, for me, community and a female community is so big. So I feel like I have kind of put that everywhere in my life. It's in my coaching and my career. It's in my my recovery world. It's in even in my friendships are smaller like groups of women. So
yeah,
definitely community, and like in that also being accountable to people in that way, not being able to fall off the periphery, you know. Um for me, there's a huge element of spirituality, of a connection to a power greater than myself, um, that I call source or God or what have you. It doesn't matter, but just that it's not me. Um, Oftentimes that's the universe for me, you know? So I find that that is a huge one that I go to every day. And one of the biggest, most important, valuable things that I do on a daily basis is meditate. And my meditation is breathing based. Um, and that is, if I don't start my day that way, it impacts like the next 24 hours. And I have a busy life, you know, with kids and work and husband and everything. And it's like it's required. It's a prerequisite for the day, for sure. The other thing I would say is I don't stay in a painful place for too long. So I don't let a bunch of monkeys pile up on my back. If I have something that's uncomfortable that I have to do, I tell someone immediately. And I give myself a deadline for putting it off, because that kind of shame and anxiety, that makes me slip into wanting to escape. And I can't afford to have things in my life that I need to escape from.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said. You don't stay in a painful place for too long. And I love that. And it's just reminded me of something someone asked me the other day. And she said, how do you, she was so curious, how do you sit with feelings? Like, how do
oh,
you do that? Right. And I was
yes.
like, well, I said, to be honest, no, she said, how do you sit with like painful feelings or something like that? And I said, well, to be honest, I don't. I
Mm-hmm.
try to find out what the need is and what the hurt is, and then I do something
Yes.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
what's this sitting with it? It's like,
I
I don't know what that is. I kind of understand the narrative, but
yeah.
I think it can be misinterpreted when
I
actually we might
agreed.
need to nourish our nervous system or journal it out. Or
Yes.
what do you need, sweetheart? We're not going to just leave that poor little bit just feeling shit, are we? We're going to
No,
meet that
no.
need. So
Totally.
I love what
Totally.
you
I
said.
I think it's like a balance between not staying in a painful. I think this a lot as a coach. I'm sure you like get this too. It's like wanting to not dip into like toxic positivity where we're like, don't feel that negative feeling. You know, feelings are crucial. Running from them is actually going to drive me into numbing and into escapism and into self-medication. So it is this balance. And I always find, like, for people who are um, kind of new to feelings, one of the elements in my program is like emotions 101, because a lot of adults I know don't know how to express or process feelings, is literally naming it like a child. This is anger, this is sadness, not I am anger or I am sad or I am angry, but I'm experiencing this. And the crucial thing is separating the feeling and emotion that we've named from the story we tell ourselves about it. And that's why, like, you know, in 12-step program, we do inventories where we write down the stories, the resentments. We write down like the story we tell ourselves over and over and over again. The more we tell that story over and over again, the longer the emotion resides in us, and it can't actually be processed. And what we all know is when we bury our feelings, we bury them alive. They're not going anywhere. And so if we're not processing them and allowing them without creating a hospitable environment for them, right, at the same time, the balance, then we get, you know, emotionally congested.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I
I'm
feel
working
strongly
with
about feelings.
yeah, good. No, I hear that, and I love what you said, that about the separating that from the story that
Yes,
we
it's huge.
tell ourselves again. And I love that. Like, I've been working with the kind of mantra, this too, at the moment. Not this too shall pass, but this too. So
This too.
whatever is I need to, whatever is presenting, I go, well, okay, well, what happens if I just allow that? And often it
Yes,
just,
passes.
it just passes, and then it
Yeah,
passes through, and it's like, okay, yeah, you
yeah.
too, it's fine, it's like,
I had a therapist who said, like, I haven't lost someone yet from processing an emotion. Like,
yeah,
we're so resistant. It's
yeah.
why, and I think it's partially why I was so resistant to writing. Because what I know now from having taken round after round of writing Your Recovery is that with Anne, is that I know that it won't, like, it's writing can help me access those emotions faster because it transports me to that time, like we said. But it gives me that opportunity now to process some of the older feelings that I've probably left. Like I said, I hadn't touched some of those memories in so long.
Yeah,
So it is really
yeah,
like a portal, if you will.
yeah. And I think that there's something that's just kind of glimmering away from me. What you said about, it's like the women's circles, the oral tradition, the
Mm-hmm.
writing. This is all circling around stories and narratives and sharing, which is
Yes.
feels like what we need. I feel like that's what we need to be doing as humans, but as
Yes.
women, is to
As women.
gather
Yes.
intentionally and tell
Mm-hmm.
stories in whatever way
Mm-hmm.
we do. Yeah.
100%. I mean, if not just because for decades and decades, if not like centuries, we've just been taught to not get together and to be, foes rather than friends. And so it's really powerful. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Mm, yeah. Oh, I just want to take a moment now. I was just thinking about that. Just letting it all land,
Let it
letting it
in.
all, yeah. And
Yeah.
so what projects are you working on now? What's coming up for you?
I mean, I'm working closely with Anne to work on my memoir, and I'm devouring this process. Like it has been, it's a light in my life. I love
Mm,
the process of writing, of crafting my work. Um, I love having a community to bring it to. That is, I've never had that before with
mm,
writing ever. Um, Having that in a safe place, safe, like loving feedback. It's not,
yeah.
it's like, it's constructive, but it's also loving. I didn't want to be beat up after I put my soul on paper out there, right?
Mm,
So, so I'm working with Anne on that. And, I continue to work in my coaching program and community with, which is a lot of mindset and IFS, like we talked about,
mm,
and healing. Because I find a lot of women can get alcohol free and sober. But then like that's kind of where it ends. It's like that's the top of the mountain. And I disagree with that. I think it's a great jumping off place.
mm.
Yeah.
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 And so we're coming to the end, but I just want to finish with we always say, what's your reason to love sober today?
Oh, well, this
Of
being,
course.
I mean, for one, being
Yeah.
able to have like what I always call like soul diving, like to be able to be on a call and just go to the core and the meat and potatoes in literally minutes. I would run from the hills if I was not sober. Like I would not be able to be doing that. And I think like ultimately I am living a life that is aligned with my who I am, my values, who I know myself to be. And before when I was drinking, like I didn't even know who I was. So my life did not reflect anything authentic much for me. So I'm family and yeah, it's so full and wonderful. What is there not to love sober today?
I love that. Thank you. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's a good flip. What is not to love about being sober? Amen. So thank you so much. It's been fantastic. You've really cheered me
My
up to
pleasure. Oh,
say.
good.
Yeah, I've
Good.
come
Good,
finished
good,
because
good.
it's like the night time for me when I'm recording this. So I finished the day with a glow.
Off to bed.
Yeah. So if you're immediately concerned about your drinking, please do just reach out, send up a flare, find a community that kind of can support you. There's so many online. You can always reach out to me, kate@lovesober.com, and I will see you soon for more.